Breaking. Celtics could reopen the summer trade target chase. The window is open now. If you're a Celtics fan, you know this feeling. The team is strong, but there's always that flea behind your ear. Is there a missing piece to protect the squad from winning the title once and for all? And now the trade window has opened, and that summer target could be back on the radar. The pain is simple. You can't wait for the season to hit to realize there was a lack of size, depth, or fit on the bench. So today I'm going to show you why this move makes sense again, what Boston can look for without breaking the core, and how it can immediately elevate the team. It's done. And before I show you who this target could be and why the timing is perfect now, do the following quickly. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any trade updates, leave a like because it helps me bring you more Hot Celtics videos, and activate the bell because any rumor can turn into a real movement out of nowhere. And comment below, what piece do you think is missing for us to become even stronger? I will read the best ones and bring them in the next video. Now stay with me until the end because I'm going to show you the most likely scenario, what Boston would have to deliver, and how it could change the team this season. If you follow the Boston Celtics closely, you know that there are moments during the season when the news doesn't explode on the court, but grows quietly behind the scenes. And December 15th is exactly that kind of milestone. It's not a date that decides a title alone, but it's a date that changes the board because it marks the unofficial start of the NBA trade season. This is when many players who signed in the offseason become eligible to be traded, and this transforms conversations that were previously just ideas into concrete possibilities. Suddenly, the market gains movement. The news accelerates, rumors increase, and organizations begin to act with calculated urgency. Within this scenario, a name that may seem discreet at first glance makes sense again: Day'Ron Sharpe. And I like to look at this story in a very direct way, as if I were talking to you while we observe the cast and try to understand what is noise and what is a real signal. Because the Celtics, when they get into this kind of conversation, typically aren't looking for spectacle. You are looking for fine-tuning. He's looking for rotation security. He is trying to ensure that the season is not decided by a weakness that could have been corrected in advance. During the offseason, the Celtics reportedly showed interest in Sharpe, not as a big headline movement, but as a fitting idea. A young, physically strong center, too, 4'8" tall, who could enter a competitive rotation and fight for useful minutes, especially in a team that already thinks about the season with a May and June mentality. But this movement did not happen. Sharpe returned to the Brooklyn Nets on a 2-year contract worth $12.5 million with $6.3 million this season and next, plus a club option for the final year. This detail seems small, but it isn't. Contracts with options and manageable values are precisely the type of asset that gains relevance when the exchange window opens and when teams in different situations begin to look at what makes sense in the short and medium term. And here comes the question that, for me, is the center of everything. Why can this subject arouse so much interest now? The answer largely depends on the Celtics' specific moment in the pivot position and the path the team is building. Neemias Queta has been growing, delivering impact, showing presence, and giving the team a defensive and physical base that, for a long time, fans have missed in some key moments. When a player like this starts a positive streak, the squad gains stability. The rotation becomes clearer, the execution is consolidated, and the team now has a firmer identity in the paint. But the regular season and playoffs are different worlds. And this difference, for those who follow it closely, always comes back as a silent warning. In the regular season, you can test formations, switch styles, manage physical loads, and choose the best scenarios for each player. In the playoffs, the opponent starts to study you in detail, and each series is its own story. This is when the league separates teams with robust plans from teams that rely on improvisation. That's when you find out if the depth of the cast is real or if they're just comfortable on paper. And that's why the debate over a rotation pivot is no small detail. The pivot position is one of those roles where physical exhaustion is high, contact is constant, and the impact of a specific matchup can completely change the course of a series. When Queta leaves the court, the Celtics have resorted to smaller formations, and this can work very well in various contexts, especially in games that require speed, defensive exchange, and spacing. Small ball, when used well, is not an emergency plan. It can be a smart choice for attacking specific opponent weaknesses. The problem is that the postseason demands a second layer of answers. When you face a team that imposes a physical presence in the paint, that dominates rebounding, that makes the pick and roll an exhausting machine, and that forces contact repeatedly, you need alternatives that don't depend on heroics, but on structure. That's where Sharpe can come in as a logical hypothesis, even without being a star. He has consistent production for the role he usually plays for the Nets. He adds points and rebounds in controlled minutes and offers precisely that type of presence that doesn't draw as much attention in highlights, but can stabilize the rotation. In a contender, this is usually valuable because it prevents sudden drops in intensity and gives the coach tactical margin to protect players, adjust matchups, and prevent the team from being forced to always play in a single way. The most interesting thing about this story is not selling the idea that Sharpe would be a great revolution in the cast. The most interesting thing is to understand the type of logic that a team like the Celtics can use in this part of the calendar. Boston is not in a rebuilding phase and is not looking for a name to salvage a season. It is in the refinement phase, seeking to reduce risks and prepare the cast for the most demanding scenario possible. And when a team thinks like this, the December market becomes a strategic opportunity, not a spectacle. On the other side, Brooklyn lives a different reality. A team with a weak campaign with less ambitious short-term goals tends to value its assets more flexibly. A 24-year-old player with a relatively friendly contract could be seen both as part of a future build and as a trade piece to expand draft capital or reorganize the rotation. This is how the logic of December captures everyone's attention. Contenders note affordable fittings. Teams on another route evaluate what can be converted into value for the future, and the Celtics have the tools to enter that conversation. There is capital from second-round picks, and there is the possibility of absorbing salary with financial mechanisms created in previous moves. This does not mean that the exchange will happen. It just means the Celtics wouldn't be heading into impossible territory if they decided to explore that kind of avenue. And in a league where flexibility is almost as valuable as talent, that difference matters. Now, the point that I consider most important for those who follow the team as fans and as rotation analysts is to understand the real pain behind this issue. The Celtics do not suffer from a lack of quality in the core. The historical pain that appears when the season approaches the knockout stage is another. The feeling that a detail could cost a series because the appropriate response was not available at the right time. This tension is very understandable. It's not emotional exaggeration. It's postseason reading. After all, it's almost always a small adjustment, not a dramatic change, that defines who makes it through a series and who falls along the way. That's why a name like Sharpe can gain relevance in the discourse. It symbolizes a possibility of stability, a rotation piece with physical strength, rebounding, and enough presence to hold specific minutes against big opponents, without requiring the team to completely change its style, and without pressuring Queta to carry alone a responsibility that, in long and physical games, can become too heavy. It is a hypothesis of balance and collective protection of the cast, not of replacement of protagonism. And I think this is a really honest way to bring the topic to your channel name video. You don't need to treat this as certainty or as an empty rumor. You can treat it as a scenario reading. It could show that this conversation makes sense because the date unlocks the market, because Boston has already had interest in the player, because the contract is manageable, because the Nets may be open to options, and because the center position is, historically, a point that every contender needs to watch carefully before the playoffs. At the same time, there is a strong and fair counterpoint. The Celtics may be saving ammunition for a more impactful target. There may be a higher-level opportunity on the radar, something that justifies holding assets and prioritizing a larger trade. And a smart front office never loses that perspective. This is part of the calculation. Improving rotation today can be great, but spending resources that could be decisive tomorrow is not always the right choice. Both readings are legitimate, and it is precisely this tension that makes the story more interesting. In the end, what makes this theme so attractive to everyone? The best thing is that it combines emotion and logic. Emotion because the Celtics symbol always comes with high expectations. Logical because the NBA calendar really creates windows in which previously unfeasible conversations become possible. And when these two things meet, the subject takes on a life of its own. Personally, I like to think of this stage of the year as a test of competitive maturity. Champion teams are not just those with stars. They are those who manage to build a squad that doesn't fall apart when a piece leaves the court or when the opponent forces the game into uncomfortable terrain. If the Celtics decide to look at Sharpe as a fit piece to add depth to the big rotation, there is consistency. If you decide to wait for something bigger, there is also consistency. What doesn't change is the logic of the moment. The exchange window begins to take shape, the market accelerates, contracts unlock, and behind the scenes become the stage for decisions that may seem small on the day, but huge later on. And that's exactly why this topic is so successful, because it's not about an isolated name. He's about what the Celtics want to be when the season really picks up. It's about reaching the playoffs with more than one possible answer, with more than one way to win, and with more than one way to sustain physical intensity. It's about reducing strategic risks without compromising what already works. And this is where the situation gets really interesting. If the Celtics decide to act now, they could be anticipating an adjustment that many people will only perceive as urgent once the playoffs are already underway. And if you decide to wait, it's because there is something bigger being monitored behind the scenes. Either way, the message is clear. The window has opened, the market has come to life, and Boston is in a perfect position to make a smart, surgical move with a real impact on the rotation when it matters most. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think the Celtics need another traditional center on the bench, or do you trust that the current path already holds their place in the playoffs? Leave your opinion here because I read everything and this helps guide the next videos. And if you want to continue in this line of in-depth and updated Celtics analysis, I left the Celtics analysis playlist in the pinned comment. Click there now and binge watch because there is content that connects directly with what we discussed today, and you will understand the team's complete scenario for this decisive phase of the season.